yeah, we're talking about Suu Kyi, her party, the National League for Democracy, that it had won landslides in 1990, 2015, 2020, before the coup in 2021. That is for the record. And Professor Swaran Singh, finally, very, very quickly and briefly, for India, do you think this means continued engagement without illusions? That's the only option.
I think it's thanks to Ambassador Bhatia that in 52nd minute of our hour-long discussion, we mentioned the name Madam Aung San Suu Kyi. That tells us about democracy and future of democracy in Myanmar. Of course, from 1990s, we have agreed that whosoever is in command in Yangon, India would be dealing with that. But there is absolutely no visible alternative either to NLD or to Aung San Suu Kyi. India will have to keep that in mind as to how to, let our brothers and sisters, as Ambassador Bhatia described them, conduct themselves internally, and whether India can support and help them in resolving some of these long pending issues, particularly in the upper Burma provinces. Whether development is the only method that can deliver them democracy, or India will have to look beyond that. What is expected from ASEAN nations, if they are also going to really virtually insulate themselves from what is happening inside?
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. Welcome back. I'm going straight to Professor Swaran Singh. Professor Swaran Singh, I somehow feel that the Min Aung Hliang will likely engage with India for legitimacy, connectivity and diversification, while it leans on China for economic lifelines and diplomatic cover. Do you agree with this? Do you think he will depend on India for legitimacy, for connectivity, for diplomatic cover, and actually lean on China for economic benefits, economic lifelines and diplomatic cover?
Indeed, Basveer, you have answered your question in your question itself. For me, the President Liang now has no other option, and some of these are already visible. The only three countries from the neighborhood that sends their envoys for his inauguration other than Thailand is China and India. So in that sense, he's already been in touch with India, I suppose, that led to this kind of decision from India to send an envoy. Indeed, the Minister of State in Ministry of External Affairs carried a letter from Prime Minister Modi felicitating now the civilian President Liang, mentioning of the long-standing friendship between two countries and looking forward to strengthening our bilateral relations and so on. So both sides, I think, are clearly gearing up to revive that kind of strong relationship. But that's definitely not going to be at the cost of relationship with China. So you did mention that there are going to be niche areas where China is going to really be helpful, because ultimately after this 5 years of complete chaos, socio-political, cultural chaos, the stability itself is not good enough, and if he has to bring back some kind of welfare measures, start some kind of developmental trajectory, both China and India will be very important partners for him to engage. And as far as USDP not winning elections in neighboring provinces of Chin, Saigon, Kachin or Rakhine is concerned, from the very beginning, if you go into history, Upper Burma was never in control of whosoever was in control in Yangon. So particularly military supported USDP was not expected to win in these areas, but also especially from 1990s when India started engaging the military junta in Yangon, India made that distinction very clear that India would try to build a relationship with whosoever is in command in Yangon in that sense. And of course, to some extent, India does and continues to support NLD and democracy. Right. But overall, I think gradually relationship has become state-to-state relations. And I think that will again be revived, and therefore I do hope that both sides are going to engage each other, much more strongly. General Liang has visited India several times. He is familiar with Indian leadership and India. So I suppose that is something, that's not his option, but he'll have to engage India and China both.
Absolutely. And President Hliang, apart from visiting India in 2017, 2019, later on, and most recently, on the 4th of April 2025, General Hliang met Prime Minister Modi during the BIMSTEC summit in Bangkok. Absolutely. Of course, India has decided to step up engagements, which is a very good sign. We'll talk in details about that. Let me turn to Professor Swaran Singh in New Delhi. Professor Swaran Singh, what as the ambassador said that he has already gained legitimacy, but his critics as well as international organizations have gone to the extent of saying that the elections were sham. It was a sham elections and so on, and that elections were held only in those areas controlled by the junta, and that opposition parties, including Aung San Suu Kyi's party, that is the National League for Democracy, they were not allowed to contest, or they did not contest, and so on and so forth. So do you agree with Ambassador Bhatia that General Min Aung Hliang has already got the legitimacy that he had worked for, or do you think that is natural as far as if you look into Myanmar's recent history is concerned?
Thank you. Let me first say, yes, I agree with Ambassador Bhatia. As far as holding elections in a continuous chaos of last 5 years is concerned, but as you mentioned, elections did not happen in roughly around 35% of constituencies. Second, the major political parties, the most important political party, NLD, was banned and could not participate in elections. Indeed, any criticism of elections was meant imprisonment, and therefore very rarely you heard voices from inside as to whether the elections were a sham or not. So in those circumstances, yes, elections were held after 5 years of chaos, but nature of elections and the fact that you had a clearly military sponsored political party, Union Solidarity and Development Party, winning the elections. In fact, a bulk of seats have gone to this party. Out of only 420 seats that were contested, out of the total seats, I think 664 for both houses of parliament, Union Solidarity and Development Party has got 339. So impressive in that sense. So orchestration of a sham election is definitely something that I would underscore. Particularly so because now, if you notice, there is other than European Union and United States and few specific European countries that are condemning this election, most of the ASEAN is taking a fairly pragmatic approach, which actually legitimizes what General Hliang has tried to do. There is complete disjointed response from ASEAN. Thailand, which is another military dominated nation state, has been the only one to send an envoy on the inauguration of the new president, shedding his uniform into civilian clothes. So complete disunity, both even the resistance forces at home, the ethnic resistance forces are completely disunited. So in that kind of uncertainty, and now the whole world focusing on Iran elections, energy security, I think he's peacefully managed to, first rule in uniform for 5 years. Now get another 5 years as a civilian president. So in a worst case scenario, he's managed to hold some kind of elections and got himself extension.
Right. In a worst case scenario, General Hliang. Let me turn to Professor Singh. Professor Swaran Singh, what could India's counter hedging strategy actually be? Because Myanmar's economy is in ruins. There is severe contraction, there is hyperinflation, disruption in supply chains, poverty affecting over 50% of the population of Myanmar, 55 million population, over 50% are poor. They have junta prints. According to some reports, junta is even going to the extent of printing money to fund the war, so on and so forth. Now, do you think India has a huge scope to capitalize on this situation? and make its presence felt, because we cannot forget the fact that China was the first country to congratulate Min Aung Hliang when he became the president than any other country.
Not just that, Basveer, President Xi Jinping himself congratulated General Liang, the President Liang now, and talked of taking relationship forward between these two countries. And as Ambassador Bhatia underlined, during the last 5 years, China has made enormous progress in expanding its close relationship with Myanmar. Now that itself presents the first challenge for India, because last 2 or more decades now in immediate neighborhood, which is the frame through which India looks at Myanmar as well, because China has been able to deliver several turnkey projects, much bigger projects, much faster speed, we have to make sure that India is able to accelerate the completion of some of the important major projects like Kaladan multimodal project, for example, or the trilateral expressway, etc., which is going on for so long and unending. So because China is doing things faster, even if India does things as it used to, now that looks like in competition. So the first thing is to give assurance that we are going to accelerate implementation of some of these projects is something that I think the new administration in Yangon will be looking forward to. Plus also, in the last time he was here, a MOU was signed for joint military exercises, military exchanges, etc. and so on. Some of those will also be now picking up a certain momentum, I suppose. But fundamentally, the other concerns that India constantly has about Myanmar, even today I was reading the news, 34 refugees passing over to Mizoram today itself or yesterday itself, and that kind of trickle down continues, and you mentioned 30,000 and so on. That is something that India also needs to find out certain solution to, how to manage that kind of flow, whether India can work with Myanmar on that. To some extent, border security is another constant concern, more than 1,600, I think 1,644 kilometers. And right now it's much comfortable, but invariably the concerns about sanctuaries being provided across the border, because Yangon very often doesn't control these areas.
Right.
So how to carry forward that track to, etc., to get in touch with some of these resistance forces, ethnic groupings and so on, to make sure India is able to feel confident of border security, is able to accelerate the projects that it is doing for now more than a decade.
Right.
And then, of course, look at areas where India can transfer technology, make ground level investments, skill building, capacity building, and so on. And of course, trade is another constant matter of concern for India to move that forward. New administration will definitely like to start a kind of a new chapter with both China and India. India will have to find niche areas where it is attractive to